In a single Austrian Grand Prix weekend, the FIA banned Ferrari's most valuable innovation, kept George Russell's pole position after his own teammate aborted the same lap for the same flag, and had already named Red Bull, a team that has not won a single race this season, as Formula One's strongest engine. 3 decisions, 48 hours, all pointing the same direction. Ferrari's team principal, Fred Vasseur, is not a man who says things for effect. He spent 20 years in the junior formulae, saying almost nothing controversial. So when he sat in front of the media on Saturday night and said on the record to Sky Sports Italia that very often it seems the coin always falls on the right side for Mercedes, he was not venting. He was naming something specific. And the facts of that weekend are very hard to argue with. To understand what Vasseur was reacting to, you need to understand that the Austrian Grand Prix weekend contained 3 separate FIA-related events, all in the space of 48 hours, and that no single outlet covered all 3 together. The first was the qualifying incident on Saturday. Max Verstappen crashed his Red Bull at turn 9 on the final lap of Q3. Single yellow flags were shown. George Russell was approaching the corner. He lifted, by his own account, a massive lift, 96 meters earlier than his previous push lap. He still set pole position, beating both Ferrari drivers by more than 2/10. His teammate Kimi Antonelli, just seconds behind Russell on track, saw the same yellow flags and interpreted them as double yellows. He aborted his lap entirely. He started 4th. The second was the FIA's ruling that Russell's pole would stand. The stewards reviewed the data. Russell had complied with the single yellow requirement. The fact that a car had hit the wall hard enough to deploy the medical car, and that Antonelli, a driver in the same team on the same circuit, in the same moment saw double yellows, was noted, and then set aside. The third event happened the same weekend, but received almost no coverage in the context of the qualifying controversy. The FIA published updated 2027 technical regulations confirming that Ferrari's exhaust wing concept, a device Ferrari had designed into the SF26 from pre-season testing in Bahrain, a device the FIA had cleared as fully legal under 2026 rules, would be banned from next season. Ferrari stood alone as the only manufacturer opposing the ban. 3 events, 1 weekend. Vasseur saw the pattern. The FIA cleared Ferrari's exhaust wing as fully legal on a Tuesday. The FIA banned it for 2027 on a Friday. The same governing body, 11 weeks apart. That is not a contradiction in isolation. Regulations evolve. The FIA is entitled to close loopholes proactively. What makes the Austria weekend significant is the combination. The exhaust ban confirmation landing the same 48 hours as the qualifying decision that handed Russell pole position ahead of both Ferraris. And Vasseur, a man who very rarely says things for effect, used a specific word. Not unfair, not wrong. He said strange. Getting pole position under the yellow flag, he said, is a bit strange. That choice of language is the tell. Strange is what a politician says when he means something stronger, but does not want to make an enemy of the governing body. Start with the qualifying incident, because the facts alone are already uncomfortable. Russell's final Q3 lap was, by his own telemetry and by the steward's analysis, a genuine lift. 96 meters earlier into turn 9 than his previous push lap. He lost time. He still took pole by 0.236 seconds from Leclerc. The FIA Sporting Regulation 1.8.4 requires a driver to reduce speed and be prepared to change direction under a waved yellow. Russell did that. The stewards were satisfied. On the letter of the regulation, Russell did nothing wrong. Here is what the letter of the regulation does not address. Antonelli, the championship leader, racing for Mercedes, driving a faster car than Russell through most of that session, saw the same marshal post, the same flag, and made a different decision. He later said he thought it was double yellow, because the sun was in his face and the panel had turned yellow and he could not tell single from double. He aborted. He lost the front row. Sky Sports F1's Jamie Chadwick said on air, "The bit that is a potential issue is the fact a car was in the wall. There probably should have been a double-waved yellow. The race director's office issued single yellows for 15 seconds while a Red Bull was embedded in a barrier with the medical car deployed. At some circuits, in some years, that scenario has produced a red flag. In Austria, on Saturday night, it produced a pole position for Mercedes." Vasseur's exact words to the media: "Race control decided that further action was necessary." That is an extraordinarily careful sentence from a team principal who could easily have said nothing. The exhaust wing story is where the politics become visible. Ferrari's FTM device, flick tail mode internally, was designed into the SF26 from the very beginning, not as an afterthought. The rear of the car was built around it. The differential was repositioned, the crash structure packaging was revised. The space for the device was created deliberately, which is exactly why rivals could not simply copy it without a major redesign requiring rehomologation of core components. The FIA reviewed the device in pre-season testing. Technical director Nicolas Tombazis told media in February that Ferrari's solution, in the FIA's view, was okay. His exact words: "We have generally speaking encouraged solutions that reduce drag. That is why the DRS regulations of last year, which were limiting the amount of slot gap opening, have not been maintained this year. It is to give more freedom, and the Ferrari solution we believe is okay." The FIA gave Ferrari a green light in February. The device ran legally on Hamilton's car in Austria's FP1, while Dino Beganovic ran without it as Ferrari gathered comparative data. The same weekend, the FIA published the 2027 regulations banning the concept entirely. Now, here is the specific political dimension that nobody is reporting clearly. Ferrari stood alone in opposing the ban. Mercedes, Red Bull powertrains, Honda and Audi all backed the FIA's position. 4 manufacturers against 1. The device is worth, according to reports, as much as half a second per lap under certain conditions. It is built into Ferrari's car architecture in a way competitors cannot replicate for 2026. Banning it for 2027 does not affect Ferrari this season, but it tells Ferrari clearly that the innovation road they chose, aggressive aerodynamic solutions to compensate for power deficit, has a ceiling. And that ceiling was decided by 4 manufacturers who had nothing to lose from drawing the line. The counter-argument is straightforward. Russell's lift was genuine, 96 meters earlier into turn 9, confirmed by data. The stewards reviewed it, single yellow, complied. Antonelli admitted the mistake was his. The exhaust ban applies to everyone from 2027, not just Ferrari. The FIA said it was closing a loophole before it became a development war. Both decisions, taken individually, were correct under the rules as written. Here is what that counter-argument cannot explain. Toto Wolff was asked directly after qualifying whether the race director should have shown double yellows given a car was in the barrier and the medical car was deployed. He did not say no. He said, "The rules were applied." Vasseur said, "Getting pole under a yellow flag is a bit strange. 2 team principals, same question, same night, both answering with procedure instead of outcome, both choosing words that are technically defensible and deliberately incomplete. When the man who benefited from the ruling and the man who didn't both reach for the same kind of careful language, that is not coincidence. That is 2 people who understand the same thing and are choosing how much of it to say out loud. Step back from the individual incidents and look at what the 2026 season's regulatory landscape actually looks like from Ferrari's perspective. Ferrari arrived in 2026 with a car they built around specific innovations: the Macarena rear wing, the FTM exhaust concept, and a power unit architecture that sacrifices current output for long-term development potential. That last point is the one that gets lost. Reports from inside Ferrari's technical program suggest the SF26's power unit is deliberately tuned conservatively, a compromise engine with the potential to be significantly stronger, but reliability constrained in its current form. Ferrari accepted that limitation because the ADUO framework promised a path: be behind now, get tokens, close the gap structurally. That framework has now produced one token used in Austria with a fifth-place result. The second token, the turbocharger, arrives after summer, at minimum 6 races away. Meanwhile, the aerodynamic innovation Ferrari used to compensate for power deficit has been signalled as a dead end from 2027, and the qualifying controversy in Austria denied Hamilton a front-row start at a circuit where starting position directly affects race strategy. The title math consequence is concrete. Hamilton starts the Silverstone weekend 46 points behind Antonelli. Russell is 40 points back. If Ferrari had started first and second at Austria, rather than second and third, Leclerc qualified P2, Hamilton P3, the race strategy options change. Whether the result changes is speculative. What is not speculative is that the FIA's single yellow decision, its exhaust ban timing, and its ADUO benchmark ruling are 3 independent decisions that each individually disadvantaged Ferrari in 2026, while being individually defensible. There is a word for this in political science. It is called structural disadvantage. It does not require intent. It does not require conspiracy. It just requires that the rules are written, interpreted, and enforced by a body whose institutional interests do not perfectly align with any single competitor's, and that when the margins are this tight, the direction of every ambiguous call matters. Vasseur knows this. He chose the word strange. Not wrong, not unfair, strange. Wolff chose the rules were applied. Not single yellow was correct. Not Ferrari's complaint is wrong. The rules were applied. 2 men, same question, same night. One who gained from the ruling, one who lost from it. Both refusing to say the thing directly. Both saying enough that the people who were listening knew exactly what they meant. That parallel, 2 team principals choosing the same kind of careful, incomplete language on the same evening, is the most important thing that happened in Austria that nobody reported. It is more revealing than the FIA's decision itself. And the ADUO benchmark story makes the pattern a 3rd data point, not a 2nd. The FIA evaluated every power unit in Formula 1 after 5 races and named Red Bull, a team that finished outside the top 2 in every race where weather or safety cars did not intervene, as the strongest internal combustion engine in the sport. Mercedes, which had won every race to that point, received a smaller concession than Ferrari. Ferrari, which won in Barcelona 3 weeks earlier, received 2 development tokens, confirming it was more than 4% behind a benchmark team that was not winning races. Max Verstappen's reaction when the ADUO findings were published was not subtle. He said, "Our engine, the most powerful combustion engine of all? We're baffled." His teammate, Isaac Hadjar, said, "I checked to see if we had won the first 6 races of the season, but no, we haven't." Even Red Bull, the supposed beneficiary of being named benchmark, rejected the finding and demanded a review. The FIA reviewed it. The finding stood. Ferrari accepted the finding because it gave them 2 upgrade tokens and a development path. They used the first token in Austria. They finished 5th. And the same weekend the token was deployed, the FIA confirmed that the aerodynamic innovation Ferrari had built to compensate for the power deficit it was awarded tokens to fix, the FTM exhaust wing, would be illegal from next season. That is the full picture. 3 decisions, 1 weekend, 1 direction. Before the verdict, Silverstone is 2 days away. Ferrari arrives at Hamilton's home circuit, having lost the front row in Austria under a flag decision, with an exhaust innovation being wound down for 2027, and a power unit that will not receive its next meaningful upgrade for at minimum 6 weeks. The FIA's next ADUO review happens after Hungary. That review will determine whether Ferrari gets a third development window. If it does, and if the turbocharger delivers in the second half, the regulatory picture changes. If it does not, what Austria revealed is not just a bad weekend, it is the shape of the remainder of this championship. 3 decisions, 1 weekend, 1 direction. The FIA cleared Ferrari's exhaust wing in February and banned it for 2027 in June. The stewards kept Russell's pole when the championship leader aborted his lap for the same yellow flag. And Ferrari stood alone, 4 manufacturers against 1, in opposing the regulation that closed their innovation path. None of those decisions were wrong under the rules. All of them landed the same way. Here is my verdict. Vasseur is not wrong. He is not conspiring. He is doing what intelligent people do when they have data. He is naming a pattern without overstating it. The coin always falls on the right side for Mercedes is not an accusation. It is an observation, and the facts of the Austrian weekend support it. The question this raises for Silverstone is not whether Hamilton can win. He can. The question is whether Ferrari can sustain a title challenge across 14 more race weekends when the regulatory environment consistently resolves ambiguity against them, when their most valuable innovation is legislated away for next year, and when their power upgrade timeline runs 6 weeks behind the championship calendar. I think Hamilton finishes on the podium at Silverstone. I think Ferrari takes points. I do not think the pattern Vasseur described disappears. And that is the most important thing about what happened in Austria that almost nobody covered. Here is the debate I want you to settle below. Vasseur named Mercedes specifically, but the beneficiary of all 3 Austria decisions was not just Mercedes, it was the status quo. Is the FIA protecting Mercedes, protecting the commercial product, or is this genuinely just how the margins fall? I want your specific argument, not a take, but an argument in the comments. In our next video, dropping for Silverstone Race Week, we go back to the title math. Sprint weekend at Hamilton's home circuit, 46 points down. What does Hamilton actually need to happen to make this championship real again? That drops Friday. Subscribe now so you don't miss the calculation. And if you missed our breakdown of the ADU deployment problem from Austria, the separate technical story that runs alongside everything we discussed today, that's on screen right now. Watch both videos together. They're 2 halves of the same story.